Alrighty. Hello and welcome, Women in Tech. Very excited to be here. Very excited to see you all. My name's Alex Macleod, and I am a woman in technology. I've worked in tech my whole career. I'm actually a menopausal woman in tech, so you all have got that out there for you. So welcome. You'll get that at some point. It's amazing. So yeah. And today, Linda and I will explain to you how we unleash the power of data at Electrolux. It's not leashed here, we've unleashed it. So we want you to appreciate the difference there. And how each and every one of you can unleash the power of data in your own careers, no matter what your field. Oh, that was noisy. Okay, so yeah. I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about how we use data when designing digital products at Electrolux. So just to be clear, I'm not an engineer. I know there's lots of women who are engineers here, and that's fantastic. I'm not an engineer. I'm a designer. I'm a UX designer by training, so that's my background. And in fact, before we start, I wanted to share a little bit about my career path and how I got here. So as you can see, I've worked both in large enterprises as well on the design agency side. A lot of designers get to do both because you get to really hone your craft at design agencies, whilst at large enterprises you get to actually apply some of that knowledge and take some ownership, which is something, unfortunately, on the agency side you don't always get. But in 2005, I had my first baby. I have 2 sons. I have created 2 human people from my body, and maybe there's some women in the room who've done the same or will do the same. Yes, that is one thing that definitely differentiates us from men in tech, is that we create humans with our bodies. So yes. And so after I had my first son, I actually didn't return to full-time work for 9 full years, people, because I was in the UK. Childcare costs in the UK are very, very high, and also just to be able to get that working. I mean, like in Sweden, people say, "Oh, it's 4:30. I'm going to go and pick up my kids from daycare," and everybody goes, "Cool." In the UK, people would look at you like, "What?" So it was not really something I could do right at that time. And also, my husband was building his career at that time, so we made a bit of a trade-off at that point. He is now at home with the kids, just so you know. So we did like a full swap. Yeah, so you can do that. And I just wanted to share this with you because it was super, super scary coming back into full-time work after 9 years of being at home with the kids. Yes, I was also building e-commerce websites and doing small marketing campaigns with small businesses. So I kept my hand in, I kept my skill set up. But I was, emotionally it was very hard for me to kind of go back into a proper job. So I did, though, go back to Lloyd's Bank, where I was working for a while, where I actually learned lots of interesting things about how people think about their money. And I also learned a lot about cybersecurity, which is something which, of course, is dear to all of our hearts, is keeping people's data safe from harm. And then after Lloyd's, I was lucky enough to join Spotify, and I worked with hardware, which is my big love. So combining hardware and software. So I worked with hardware integrations. So I was one of the designers responsible for getting Spotify available on your Sonos and Bose speakers, on the Google Home Hub, which is, maybe that wasn't a very successful product, but anyway, we worked on it. I also worked on something which, we worked on this thing which was the Facebook version of it. So Facebook did, I don't know if you remember, it was like a little voice speaker with a screen on it, and it was called, the project name was Aloha. I don't know what they launched it under. And it was the world's worst project, working with that was horrible. But it was, yeah, we did that. And we worked with Samsung, which is interesting because Electrolux and Samsung are not friendly, let's say. But I worked on integrating Spotify into a Samsung refrigerator. So it's called the Family Hub, and it has this huge, basically an Android phone just slapped on the front of it. And we did a Spotify integration for that. So I got to work on all kinds of interesting projects there. So yes, that was a little bit about me and about where I come from before I joined Electrolux. But the reason I joined Electrolux is because I wanted to work with connected domestic products. So you might ask, why? Why would somebody want to work with connected domestic products? But I wanted to show you a little bit of this film that shows you what they thought was the kitchen of the future in 1956.
But this was the kitchen like none I'd seen. Put a card in the slot and onto the screen pops a picture of just how your dish will look, plus all the ingredients you need to cook. inside to feel tragic. The rest is push-button magic. So whether you bake or broil or stew, the Frigidaire kitchen does it all for you. Don't have to be chained to the stove all day. Just set the timer and you're on your way.
Yeah, so that's the kitchen of the future. And who hasn't seen some of these visions before of what our future lives look like, full of these wonderful labor-saving devices? And I don't know about you, but my kitchen would never fit this huge, enormous, giant cyclical refrigerator in it, but thanks, Frigidaire. And Frigidaire, actually, when this film was made, it was part of the General Motors group. But in 1986, actually, Electrolux purchased Frigidaire, so it's now part of Electrolux group. So when we talk about visions of the future, so actually in my career, I've even worked on creating visions of the future. And now I'm in a position where I'm actually delivering some of those things which were discussed as visions maybe 10, 15 years ago. For instance, voice-enabled technology is now something which is quite commonplace with Alexa and Google Assistant. And yes, it's this idea that we create these visions. And the kitchen and domestic spaces are particularly poignant when you're thinking about visions of the future. I think it's like a conduit for the future, which, in fact, Ruth Oldenziel, who I recommend reading, she's a technology professor, and she's a doctor and a professor, because she's a double whammy. She's amazing. And she talks a lot about this. And it's about the idea that, yes, the future kitchen is a way of kind of demonstrating technological advancement. And so we've all seen, like, the Jetsons and other science fiction films. I don't know if you've seen The Fifth Element. Anybody here seen the film The Fifth Element? If you haven't seen The Fifth Element, see The Fifth Element. I'm sure it's like an old film, so I'm sure it'll be easy to find on like a streaming service. But there's an amazing scene where one of the characters throws some pills into a dish, puts it in what looks like a microwave, opens it up and gets a full chicken dinner, which of course is the dream sometimes when you're tired at the end of the day and you like a full chicken dinner, but you don't want to cook one. So always there's these ideas of like what the future could look like, and it's often rooted in domestic space, labor saving, domestic concepts, because that really tells us about the future. I mean, any science fiction film, yeah, you can dress people up in like shiny outfits and things, but it's often like, how do they get their food? How are things maintained? That's where we can kind of get to see all these like indicators of what is the future. And I actually grew up in a vision of the future. I was brought up in a city in the UK which is called Milton Keynes. And Milton Keynes was a city that was built from scratch, and it was meant to be like this super futuristic city, and that's what it was meant to represent. And in fact, we used to get like people doing photo shoots at our local shopping centre because it looked so sort of sleek and glassy, and yeah, they had people filming pop videos there and things like that. So I actually grew up in this kind of environment as well, this idea of the future. Yeah, and so that's something that I found fascinating. But I just also want to tell you a little bit about Electrolux Group. So we're an appliance manufacturer, obviously, and our appliances are divided into 3 categories. So we've got taste, which is all your kitchen stuff. We've got care, which is laundry. And then we've got well-being, which is maybe not so many people know this, but that we do, obviously, vacuum cleaners. In fact, vacuum cleaners is where Electrolux started. So we've got clean air, clean floors, and clean water as part of well-being. In fact, we've got Moa, who's one of our designers from in the audience today, so who works with the well-being products. And then a subset of our appliances contain Wi-Fi modules in order that they can be connected to the internet, and we call these connected appliances. Brands, Electrolux has an enormous number of brands. Actually, I was quite surprised how many brands Electrolux Group holds when I joined. There's over 40 brands within Electrolux Group. But the main brands that I work with is Electrolux, AG, and Frigidaire, which you saw earlier with the lovely lady. And to be clear, for the foreseeable future, connectivity of appliances will always be enabled through mobile apps. That may not be the case in the long term, right? Maybe all of the smarts are going to be built into the appliance directly and it will talk to the cloud directly. But for right now, apps are part of the journey, both of connecting the appliance to the internet and also having all the extension of the functionality there. So we work with mobile apps in order to, create this connectivity. And when we're working with mobile apps, we refer to them as digital products, not projects. Now, for some people in this room, That's not a distinction I need to talk about. But in older companies, and Electrolux is over 100 years old, and sometimes it feels it, but it's the idea that you do projects, but in fact we work with products which are iterated, owned and iterated over time. And that's something which older companies are still kind of coming to grips with, but of course digital first companies have kind of, they're birthed that way. And this is the mobile app, and does anybody want to guess how many countries we're currently launched in? And if you're from Electrolux, you can't join in this. Anybody guess? 5, 10, 20, 30, 100? No? No idea. Okay, so we're launched in over 60 countries and we support over 20 languages. So localization is a very big part of my day job. So we work a lot with localization. And I also want to talk about the reality of connected appliances, because we saw the big vision, right? The idea that it's labor saving, you can go and play tennis whilst your really weird looking circular cake was being cooked. It was very, I don't know what she was making there. So the idea is, yes, it's labor saving. And of course, labor saving is very important. It's very important for women. I mean, the washing machine has liberated generations of women from hand washing, for instance. Although you meant to still hand wash your very delicate things, right? But yeah, I never do that, so I don't know. But it's so drudgery and all of these things. You know, this is what appliances have elevated for women, but liberated rather. But the thing is we want to go above and beyond labour saving. Labour saving is something that exists already, but we also want to go into sustainability. And sustainability is something that really drives the agenda at Electrolux. And what we're doing here is like we're trying to create appliances that both are smarter, live longer, can be remotely serviced, can also help the users conserve energy and water, of course, because it's major resources. So this is really the aim of connectivity now. It's more about not just labour saving, but enabling sustainability. And also, it helps you collect data about the way that people use your appliances, and then bring that back into the development process in order to learn better. Previously, you'd make a washing machine, you'd send it out into the world. Who knows how they use it? But now with connectivity, we can get more information, and that is the data that drives us. So here's some of the things that our connected appliances can do for you today. We've got our robot vacuum cleaners. So here, who has a robot vacuum cleaner? Anyone? Oh, not bad. Very Sweden of you. That's about a quarter of the audience. In some countries, it would be like 0, and yeah. Fantastic. Yes, robot vacuum cleaners, again, amazing labour-saving device. I'm very fond of ours. He's called Mr. Handy. Did you know that most robot vacuum cleaners are named a male name? Mine too. Right? We don't know why, but we love to call them male names. It's like because it's a robot, or because it's because they suck. We also have our air purifier. So actually an air purifier is a little robot in your home that is sucking up dust. And yes, it does mean that you've got less surface dust. And it also means you've got less crap in your air, which you might breathe in. So particularly for people with pollen allergies and things like that. But also in countries, of course, not like Sweden, we've got great air here. But in some countries, the air is not so good. And so air purifiers are a little robot that sucks up all of the dust and crap in your air. So we have those, and we have the ability to be able to remote control them via apps, and also to be able to schedule them. So if you think about something like an air conditioner, you might want it to come on before you get up at the day and turn off before you finish your day. So scheduling is a big thing. Also, we also can use data like APIs to understand the quality of your indoor air versus your outdoor air. And also we can hook into big ecosystems like Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant in order to be part of those larger ecosystems. So all of these things are things that are enabled by connectivity. And also we can help you, as I say, maintain your appliance much better. But let's talk a little bit about the design process and where we see data in it. So traditionally in a place like Electrolux, this is where the design process finishes. You've got your classic double diamond, you launch, boom. But because we're working digital products and connected appliances, we have the triple diamond model, so where you see that, in fact, post-launch, we continue to iterate and learn things. So that's a little bit about, how we think about the design process. And as you can see, we gather data throughout the design process, and we learn and we can feed it back. And so we're learning and also using data at all points in the process. And in fact, we've got one of our test engineers here, so I can't see her in the room. But yes, so all of our quality assurance tests and things like that, this is all data that we gather to help us create better experiences. And it's not just about usage metrics. I think that's important to understand. And also, you should never rely entirely on usage metrics to inform your designs. You always need soft data. You always need user interviews and surveys and ways to talk to people. You can't just continuously look at usage data metrics and just say, we know what's going on here. You always have to talk to people as well. So just a note. And here's a tiny case study before I hand over to Linda. Sorry, I don't know how I'm doing on time. And this is how we've unleashed the power of data in some of our user experience of our mobile apps. So we have a section in the app, it's a feed, which is filled with maintenance reminders, and we saw that after about 6 months, people started to not engage with it so much, which is fine. We're not like an app. We're not social media. You don't have to come and use these things. But we were interested to see if we could run a little experiment to see if we could get people a bit more engaged back into it. And we have a hypothesis that if we get more comparative data into the feed, then people would find it more engaging, because we know that that's something that people like. So we formed this hypothesis, and then we were able to build some comparisons into the app. So what you do is you can see how much your appliance is cleaned versus the week before, and also how much your appliance is cleaned in relation to other appliances around the world. So we brought like a global aspect to it. So do you think we saw more interest in the feed after this, or less? More. 3 times more. Woo! Yeah, this is just an example of how we did run a small experiment just to try and do that. And this is just one example of how we use data in Electrolux. But I'm going to now hand to Linda, who speaks how we can use data on a much larger scale than that. And I'll give you this little clicker thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Sorry. So thank you so much, Alex. Really interesting to hear how that is working in the user area and more on the consumer side. My name is Linda, and I work as head of operations, data and analytics in Electrolux Group. So that means that I'm in charge of how we're building our analytics solutions across our operations. So contrary to Alex, I will jump in directly into how we're doing that and tell you a bit more about my background later. Alex will also come back by the end of this session when we move into how we think every one of you can use data more to enhance your careers. But let's start by moving over to the fascinating world of analytics within operations. Wow, what an intro. So operations, it actually means manufacturing in our 30+ factories worldwide. It's product sourcing, it's purchasing, it's quality of our products, and the supply chain planning and execution to spread our products across all our markets. So we sell 60 million products per year and reach 120 markets. As Alex was mentioning, Electrolux is a 100-year-old company, and we have grown by acquisitions. So for me, working in IT, that means that we have an extremely complex landscape. We have multiple ERPs. We have different IT systems for different subparts of processes like warehousing or transportation. And we do have some state-of-the-art technology work on exploring edge computing, IIoT, and some of the newest cloud solutions. But all of this is coexisting with this legacy landscape of on-prem solutions, SQLs, and whatnot. So obviously, this creates some complexity, which is quite challenging, but it's also super exciting because it means that we need to be creative, we need to be problem solvers, and we need to work together to find ways of actually extracting the value of the data in this landscape. So an optimized supply chain, it is actually about having the right mix of high quality products at the right place, at the right time, to the lowest cost for an outstanding consumer experience. And if there is no availability of the product, there simply won't be any sales. So another key point for Electrolux is our environmental footprint. And at the end of 2021, we had reduced our greenhouse gas emissions in operations by 78%. That was compared to 2015, and it was 4 years ahead of our 2025 target of 80%. But this is really just the beginning, because we have an ambitious target of net zero emissions across our full value chain by 2050. So that means that it's not going to be enough to have solar panels on all our factories, to have zero landfill certification of the different factories, or to create more products made of recycled material like our Ecoline product. It means that we will need to go much, much further than that across the full supply chain, across our operations, and in the partnerships with the full supply chain of our different partners across the different supply chains. Technology, and particularly data and analytics, is from my point of view what is going to make it possible for us to get there. But it also means that we need to tackle how we reduce the CO2 emissions from our IT landscape, because all of this data is going to come up, and it's going to be crucial that we manage to not negatively impact our ability in achieving this very ambitious target by all the data that we are building up, so that we're not moving the problem from one place to another. So let me give you some examples of how we're working with analytics across our operations. You might remember this. Still maybe a fresh memory. February 2020, and COVID hit the world, and one of the impacts was specifically towards supply chains and the availability of semiconductors or microchips. About a year later, in March 2021, there was a cargo ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal, clogging up one of the main transportation routes from Asia to Europe. Both these events had tremendous effects on supply chains all over the world, and Electrolux was no different. So as a result, we have worked on a use case in regards to providing better visibility of our supply chain situation, in regards to our supplier capacity and our material availability. So we are integrating data from our direct suppliers, including their announced capacity, and through this we're projecting the total supplier capacity. So this will tell us when will we have a problem in material availability, and how will that impact our production plans. So this gives us some time to alter and react and change the different plans before the event is actually going to occur. We're specifically tracking our tier 2 suppliers for electronic components, as this has been one of the major bottlenecks for our production. So this is quite challenging and complex, because it means that we're actually taking data from external partners upstream of the value chain. We're using the bill of material here, which is a key element. The bill of material is like a cooking recipe that tells you all the different ingredients that goes into your product. So in our case, a fridge or a washing machine. Each product has multiple components. Each component has one or multiple suppliers. And some of those components, like a motherboard, is composed by a number of subcomponents, like a microchip, which in turn is supplied by the supplier of the supplier, the tier 2. So linking all of these different informations together, we can actually get the linkage of the data throughout the value chain. And it can give us information in regards to which products and potentially even customers are going to be impacted down the line. So it's still a lot of improvement being done in regards to this, but we already have a lot of better visibility today than we did pre-COVID. Another area where we're doing a lot of analytics is obviously our transportation. Transportation is one of the biggest costs, it's one of the biggest CO2 emissions, right? So we're tracking normal things like cost versus budget, how we're filling up our transports, which is obviously even more important now when the transportation cost is skyrocketing, right? We're also looking at how we are optimizing different modes of transport, such as sea, rail, truck, or intermodal, and how that is impacting our CO2 emissions. And I think it's worth mentioning here that economical benefits of optimizing, like use of means of transportation or improving fill rates, is also going hand in hand with lower CO2 emissions. So the more data that we make available, the more we're going to be able to not only look at what has happened in the past, descriptive, or why did it happen, diagnostic, or what will happen, predictive, but also more prescriptive. What are the different scenarios and what will be the best action and what will be the consequences of those? And we will be able to do it more and more across different functions and find the optimum of maximum service level to lowest possible cost for both economically and for the environment. So what are then some of the main challenges and key takeaways that I have encountered over my 17 years in analytics? It boils down to garbage in, garbage out. Your analysis is as good as your data, right? It doesn't matter how nicely visualized your dashboard might be. It provides absolutely no value if it's not making you take the right decision. And if we talk about advanced analytics such as AI or ML based on garbage data, you just have exponential garbage. So therefore, it's extremely important that you know your data. The devil is always in the details. And I'd like to share with you here a 6-step model that I find useful to building quality analytics solutions and unleashing the power of data. So first of all, you need to define the problem. You need to know what problem you're trying to solve. What is the decision that you want to drive, and how is the process working? You need to identify the data that you need. Where does the data come from? In which system does it reside? How does it end up there? What is the full process leading up to the data being created? Then you collect the data. And when you collect the data, make sure that you collect the full data set, if possible, so that you only need to do it once. If I take an example of a sales order, it can be used both for use cases in logistics, in sales, in customer service. It's just different filtering and sub-selections. So really try to not sub-optimize here. Otherwise, you end up with small islands of information with limited possibility of reuse. Then you need to prepare and pre-process your data, cleanse and format it as necessary. So here you might need to actually map it towards the common reference dimensions to be sure that, for example, you might have a vendor in ERP system 1 that is the same as the vendor in ERP system 2, but they have different codes, they have different names. You need to be able to map them together in order to actually derive any kind of an analytical insight for that vendor, right? So when you have prepared and pre-processed your data, then you're actually ready to do the real analytics work, which is then like the modeling, right? So that's when you're doing the actual calculations that you want to do. And then finally, you visualize it in a nice dashboard. I would say last, but absolutely not least, you need to verify that you're actually getting any insight out of this. Are you solving the problem that you set out to solve? Otherwise, you would need to iterate further. So to make this successful, you don't only need the technical tools, but also a broad set of competencies, both technical and functional, specialists and generalists. You need business analysts that knows the process, where the data comes from and what it means, what decisions are expected to be taken, and what is the business value that you're trying to get out of it. You need data engineers that can source and prepare the data, and you need data analysts that can visualize the results in an understandable way. But those three are just some of, let's say, the core IT people of the analytics solution, let's say. There is a vast number of roles that are needed and actually to make this successful. Some of them are on the business side, some of them are on the IT side. And I think by experience, the more diverse backgrounds, the more different experiences people have, and the more they are different in terms of age or gender or nationalities, the more they can actually challenge each other and see different point of views and achieve extraordinary results. So also, obviously, needless to say, you need a lot of communication and collaboration to get this working. And by this, I want to kind of kill the myth that you need to have a PhD in applied mathematics or an IQ of 160 or know how to build ML models to be relevant in this space. I come from a business school background. I don't have a STEM background. And one of the courses I had to retake in university because I failed it was statistics. So I came into this area from the business user side, first as a key user and subject matter expert, then moved into a business analyst role on the IT side, and so on and so forth. So I think that is actually something that is quite common for analytics. People come from different kind of paths, and you can come either from a more, let's say, business background, learn the technical tools, and move towards more the IT side, or you can be more the traditional data engineer, come from an engineering background, or even, let's say, mathematics, statistics for those most advanced, let's say, data science roles. I think another thing that has really helped me to be successful in this area is that I'm very curious. I want to understand how things work, and I like to dig myself down to the root of the problem that I'm trying to solve. I'm also very stubborn and resilient, and I think that's good because things takes time. The more complex they are, the longer it takes, right? So I think having a little bit of grit and being resilient is something that serves you well. So it turns out that these are my superpowers, and they have gotten me here, and I'm really happy to be standing here in front of you today in my role. So with that said, many paths into the area of analytics if you're interested and if you're thinking, how can I get into analytics, which is such a booming area? I think you can if you are curious enough, if you're willing to. And yeah, really, if you have the drive, you don't really need to be an engineer to do that. And that is a good path in for more women, I think, into tech. Because there is only a small portion that actually goes to STEM education, right? So with that said, I think the beauty of it is that everyone is needed. There is room for everyone because this space just keeps growing. So even if you don't dream of a career working in analytics, I think there are still ways that analytics can help you raise the bar in any job role. So I'd like to speak a bit about data literacy. So data literacy is the ability to read, analyze, work, and communicate with data. It's predicted to be the most critical skill for the workforce by 2030. So it's about empowering workers to better understand data and machines. And data literacy can help you ask the right questions. It can help you make better informed decisions and communicate essential findings to others. So is there anyone here that wouldn't need that? Raise your hand.
What's your definition of data in this context? Are you talking about numbers in a column, or are you talking about facts? What is data for you?
It is about understanding data. Yeah, about being able to understand a graph, being able to understand what is a content of an annual report. For example, like, do I understand the graphs? Do I understand like the outliers? Do I understand is this a relevant selection? To be able to critically absorb the information, yeah, and to make sense out of it. Yeah. So if there is something I would really urge you all is to develop your data literacy skills. So that can be done through your organization, potentially taking part in upskilling programs, learning how to better use the tools available, whether that is Power BI, Tableau, or whatever you might have within your organizations, within the field where you are working. But it can also be taking a free course, for example, through the dataliteracyprogram.org that I would really recommend everyone. They have tons of super interesting information in regards to how you can actually better enhance your data literacy skills. And then you can also just start by incorporating working and communicating with data in your daily work and personal life. And for that, Alex is going to come back because we put together some questions to guide you.
Yeah, so when you're thinking about using data in your, both in your role, your job role, and also when you're thinking about your career, you need to think about how and when did you, in what ways did I gather data, how have I used this data, and what metrics can I use to show the impact of my work. So if you think about something like writing your LinkedIn profile, you might want to say, I did this and I could see the effect of it was that. These are kind of powerful statements that can really help up your profile and make it seem that well, not make it seem, but it tells the story of how you've done that. I mean, I see a lot of portfolios from designers, and lots of them say, oh, I worked on this project, and I worked on that project. And it's like, that's cool, but what did that project do? And yes, you probably was part of a team effort. It wasn't absolutely all down to you, but I mean, pretty much everything we do now is not about an individual. It's about, you know, a group of people doing something. But if you can speak to the effect of your work and be able to, you know, put some kind of metric to that, super powerful and really helpful as well for future employers as well to see that and understand, oh, they're a person who can do this. But you've got more tips as well.
Yeah, I have a few examples of how I have used data. I've built up my team and my responsibilities actually by using data in my argumentation. So when I started at Electrolux 10 years ago, I was alone working in this field of analytics and operations. But by showing the increased business need, the number of mandates that would be needed to actually respond to the demands, I managed to get approval for fundings for my first trainee back in 2016. And this is how I have continuously kept on arguing for what kind of resource levels do I need in my team, how does that track internal versus externals, what is going to be the projected cost of that, what can be the benefits, etc. So today I've grown to an internal team of 16 and we have like 10 consultants working with us. So I think this is one example that speaks for like how you can actually put some really like tangible data things into your narrative to make you move in the way you want. I'll say another example. Is there anyone here who finds salary talks difficult and who wants to raise their salary?
Right?
Yeah. So I think also in that kind of context, you can use data, you can use the salary statistics from the unions, and you can, as Alex was mentioning, you can quantify what has been your contribution to the company, how has your team been growing, how has your KPIs of the projects been tracking, how is your budget adherence, these kind of things. And when you're actually prepared and you're listing those kind of things, it puts you in a completely different position when you're discussing your salary or your eligibility for a more senior role, for example. I can say the last one because I'm a data nerd. In my private life, I use data all the time, right? So
you have a lot of spreadsheets, right?
I have a lot of spreadsheets. Yeah. So, I mean, I keep track of my personal economy. I'm looking how am I tracking towards my pension. How is my fuck-off account growing? So I think in that sense, like being data-driven is making it very clear in regards to what is my current situation, what are my options, and what are the things I would need to do to move or change my situation. So I think regardless situation, using facts and data instead of like emotions in your communication makes you come across as more well-prepared, more knowledgeable, more senior, and more credible. If you also come with suggestions and options about what can be done about a situation, you would also be perceived as a solution-oriented person, and you're more likely to achieve your objectives. So I think this is something that serves anyone well, but maybe specifically us women that often need to fight conscious or unconscious bias of being perceived as emotive or junior, etc. So I think that's the power of data, yeah. So I will finish with a quote, and you already put it up.
Sorry.
Perfect. So this is from a guy called Jordan Morrow. He's like the guru of data literacy. And he says, the winners of the new industrial generation will be those with data skills. Not solely the data analysts and data scientists whose expertise have become a 21st century gold rush, but those countries and on a smaller scale organizations where all individuals have a foundational skill set that will enable them to question and derive insight from data and machines. So with that said, we urge you all to be winners and to raise the bar and unleash the power of data. Thank you.